Hello, and welcome everybody to our webinar today. We've actually chosen to host this session on this day, 25th of November, quite deliberately, because this day marks a very key awareness day, which is the elimination of violence against women and girls. Now, the day exists because women and girls face a disproportionate amount of sexual harassment and violence compared to men. And sadly and unfortunately, this can and does take place within a working environment. So to introduce myself, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Annabelle Honor, Head of EDI for Matchtech, and my role here is to lead on all of our ED&I work, and I work as part of our people team, our HR team, and worker protection is very much on our agenda, and that's as we continue to navigate legislation and the case law that we've started to see coming through. So again, it's good to have some of these cases to help us to see, what good looks like and what we need to do next. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. The webinar is being recorded and can be shared with you afterwards. You can ask questions anonymously or contribute via our chat. So you should be able to access all of those on Zoom today. And finally, I want to acknowledge that today's topic, sexual harassment, is deeply sensitive and can be a personal issue, and it may evoke strong emotions or memories for some of us. So our intention today, as always, is to approach this conversation with care and respect for ourselves and for each other. If at any point you need to step away or take a moment, please feel free to do so. Okay, so worker protection at Matchtech, what does this look like? Well, as like all businesses and all people team or HR teams, we're doing lots of work in this space. And we are committed to creating a really safe and inclusive workplace by proactively preventing sexual harassment and protecting everybody. And that's not just our workforce of around 400. We have an extended contractor workforce of around 4,000 in the UK, and around 300 clients that we work with, all of which we will spend time at their sites. Their people will come to our offices and vice versa. So we're really thinking about everybody when we're talking about worker protection. There's a number of areas that we're working on, and myself and our head of people, Elliot, who's here on the call today, we work very closely together, and we work across internal and external communities. So I hope that actually this does give a bit of definition. If anybody is on here today who does work with us now, this will give a bit of a definition as to some of the work that we're doing and what we're continuing to do. So we have set up an employee resource group specifically for worker protection. Actually, that's something that Nina and Cynthia join us on regularly, which is always good. We meet quarterly, and we make sure that we focus on what's going on internally, sharing stories, looking at anything particular that we need to tackle, and we assess our risk assessment, which is our next point. We have just renewed that, and we have committed to continue to renew that as and when we need to. Again, things have gone up, things have gone down, depending on, again, legislative changes that have already taken place, case law that we've seen coming through. We make an effort to run some quite bespoke and actually in-house built sessions for our people. They are around inclusive cultures, and again, those sessions are for our people and our managers as well. But our inclusive cultures sessions are really designed to make sure that we all understand what a great environment looks like, what that means for us, how we want to work towards that, how we should be treating each other, and how we should be looking after each other. And we do tackle sexual harassment as part of that training. And again, very good, very sort of, everyone comes into that a little bit unsure, but actually leaves feeling like they've been able to contribute and discuss how they are going to commit to making a safe environment at Matchtech, which is lovely. I've already mentioned our clients, contractors, and our candidates. Again, we have that almost sort of extended liability, really, and extended support that we want to give to those external communities. And whilst there's a lot to do, again, it's a really positive conversation with our clients. We want everybody to be safe. For our contractors, we also want to make sure that they understand legislation, that they understand that they are protected, but also that they understand how not to be part of the problem, and how to create safe and respectful environments with the people that they're working with. We've also got a lot of work to do with our suppliers and within our bidding processes as well. So really, I think that the legislation is quite all-encompassing, and it does cover anybody who could be coming into your business, or anybody that you may have connections and contacts with. So I think that sort of code of conduct, not just looking at things like environmental and social aspects or governance aspects, actually that code of conduct with our suppliers and the way in which we wish to work with them, again, needs a bit of work from our side so that we can kind of set out our expectations from the start when we are working with a new supplier. Now, the last two are things that we're working towards, and we have just actually renewed our Safe Workplace Culture membership with the Consent Collective, who will be speaking very, very soon. So the Consent Collective are a specialist consultancy in preventing sexual harassment in the workplace, and I will let Nina introduce herself to you very shortly. We were just talking about this actually, and I think that there's a really good reason for renewing, and that's because this work is really hard, and we want to get it right. And having that extra help and support from a specialist consultancy means a lot to us, and we feel like that's something we need and something that we want to continue over the next year to make sure we're taking this work seriously. And the next steps for us and our work jointly with the Consent Collective are definitely around consent as a skill and enhancing some of the active bystander training that we've spoken about. It's something we've talked about with our people and they understand what it means, but actually getting people to do it and feeling confident and comfortable to do that as well is a kind of another story. So that's something that we're going to be working on. So, as I said, we work really closely with the Consent Collective with all of this work, and we wanted to put this session on today in partnership with the Consent Collective. Really, as I said, to talk about do we have reasons to feel hopeful? And are we taking positive steps to work towards preventing sexual harassment in the workplace? So, on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Nina to introduce herself. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you, Annabelle. I'm already feeling hopeful looking at that screen and all the stuff that you're doing. Yay! Thanks, everybody. Goodbye. But I'm Nina Burrows. I'm the founder of the Consent Collective. This work, this has been my life's work. This topic area at the Consent Collective, preventing sexual harassment, improving responses to it when it does happen. Is what we do. Is all that we do. And we've been doing it. I'm actually writing a book at the moment, and it's one of those exercises where you have to reflect and count back, like exactly how long have you been doing this stuff? It's like nearly 20 years for me of watching this topic area move and change and grow. Which is why today, when we were talking with the team at Gattaca about, what kind of webinar could we put together, this is a really special day, as well as being the day that marks this desire, this ambition to eliminate violence against women and girls, which is a United Nations initiative. This is actually also the start of 16 days of activism. So if you come from our world where you're kind of part of this like change making space, this is the start of the marathon before Christmas, where we're talking about different things for the next 16 days. I think it ends. I think the last day is Human Rights Day, and it can be a really important moment of reflecting and thinking about the conversations that we're having. And I really wanted to talk about hope today. I think it's really important to, it can be an important tool. It can be really powerful. And actually, the truth is, as somebody who's looked at this topic area for a really long time, I'm feeling quite hopeful right now. And I feel like that's not very fashionable at the moment. I don't know that if we're living in a time where it feels like there's an abundance of hope. So I noticed that you've clicked on and signed up for a webinar that's got hopeful in the title today. And I want to share what this looks like from where I'm sitting, and I want to share why I'm feeling really hopeful about this work before we get into the practicalities of, well, what might that look like? Because hope for me isn't just wishful thinking. Hope is, a powerful call to action, is what keeps us going, but we need to have like momentum around the work. So I'm sitting here today with more of an activist hat on than normal in these spaces, and I'm giving myself permission to enjoy that as we kind of think about these things. I'm also still very much a psychologist, and I'm also recognizing that a lot of our psychology, the way we're wired up, is we're quite pain orientated as a species. Like we're always looking for the threat, the loss, the fear, the danger. We need to sometimes like actively and consciously focus our energies on the hopeful stuff too. So today is part of that too. We need to kind of make time to remind ourselves of the good stuff so that we can then roll up our sleeves and get on with building that future that we would love to see. Because like when we're out of balance, when we've got overwhelmed with all of the things that need doing, we can lose sight of that. And I'm aware that those of you who arrived today and you may be responsible for your organizations, what your organization is doing about workplace sexual harassment, maybe that can feel like a big task and it can feel a bit overwhelming. So, let's balance that out. Okay. So I want to put hope into context. And I'm going to do that actually by understanding, like, what is it that we're here to talk about today? This, like, elimination of violence against women and girls, specifically thinking about the workplace. And in terms of the numbers, around 20% of sexual harassment in the UK is happening in our workplaces. So it's a big proportion. If we were to make a serious dent in that, we would be making a serious dent in sexual harassment in general. One of the things that gets me excited as well is, of course, when we're working with individuals in their workplace, we're getting to work with them. We very much hope that any changes that we make, any ways in which we help people to reflect on their own behavior or have better bystander skills, of course, those skills are going to be taken outside of the workplace too. So it's one of the reasons why we're very hopeful when we're working in these spaces. But let's step back and let's think about, okay, we're trying to eliminate violence against women and girls today, but of course, like, that's our focus today, but everybody in terms of sexual harassment in the workplace. And some changes are so ambitious when we're trying to create a change. Is a change that takes generations to achieve, not just, a few weeks. And so it's important to recognize that this is one of those types of change. It's big, it's bold, it's ambitious. It needs to be because the reasons why it happens and that are very deeply ingrained in our societies and in our cultures. So it's going to take a lot of work. And if we get hopeful and we think about the work that has been done, so, at some point in time, and probably many points in time, there were like some initial conversations about workplace sexual harassment. I imagine that happened a long way back. I imagine workplace sexual harassment must be as old as workplaces. But we can document these conversations in the 60s and the 70s. And I know that the baby boomers as a generation often get a fair bit of criticism, but I want to celebrate the fact that actually, so for me, this is my parents' generation. Like, when they were in the workplace, they were having those initial conversations, and they were starting to realize, oh, it's not just me. This is actually a much bigger problem than they realized. It was all part of that kind of first wave of women's rights, women's liberation that was happening in lots of different places around the world. Those conversations eventually grew. It wasn't until 1975 that the term sexual harassment was invented. So there was a long time where people were like, didn't even have a language for this stuff. Like, what do we call it? But it was actually Lynn Farley who gave it that language, and kind of really understanding how important it is to have language around the things that you are trying to change. So all of this was happening then, like first conversations. This is bigger than we realize. This is something that we need to take into the public discourse. This is something that we want to create change around. And like, slowly over time, change does happen. We had in the UK, we had the first employment tribunal that was about workplace sexual harassment in 1983. I believe it was in Scotland. So like the first time that this is like really being enforced. And in 2010, we got the Equality Act, and like the kind of the legislation that we still point to when we're thinking about workplace sexual harassment and how this is enforced. So you can see like the time difference, like how slow these changes can be. So for those of us who struggle sometimes to be impatient with change, like this is the kind of pace that it can go at. I think the really good news for us right now is that there's been a lot of fairly modern modern momentum around this topic area. So we had Me Too, and you can timestamp that anywhere around 2016, 2017. But I mean, really, the concept was much older than that. But that really came into the public awareness. And I know a lot of people these days are almost like, oh, did Me Too not work? For somebody like me that's been sitting with the work for a long time, it's like, I don't know yet. It's too early to tell. This stuff takes time. But one of the wonderful things that has happened, thanks to Me Too and other lobbying and all sorts of pressure, is last year we got the Worker Protection Act, which is this, new legislation in the UK where employers have this positive preventative duty. They're actually legally required to now be preventing workplace sexual harassment. Can you imagine how happy the people who had those first conversations must have been to kind of see that actually coming in and being part of the legislative landscape, that this is now an expectation. This is now part of what people need to be doing, need to be thinking about. And it hasn't stopped there, because we have coming up next year, this time next year, like literally this time next year, probably the end of November-ish, the Employment Rights Act will be coming in. And I know that's being pushed around Parliament at the moment, and they're still ironing things out. But what they're not discussing is the part of that act which is about the prevention of workplace sexual harassment. I believe the things that are contentious and being discussed are the day one rights and those kinds of things. When it comes to workplace sexual harassment, that act is going to turn up the legal requirements even more. Employers will have to not just take reasonable steps to prevent workplace sexual harassment, but it will be all reasonable steps. So the bar will be much higher. There are some amazing protections in that act for whistleblowers. Really, we're going to be like quite world leading. A friend of the Consent Collective is Zelda Perkins. She was the first woman to break her NDA over the Harvey Weinstein case. And she's actually one of our, on our advisory panel here. And the lobbying that she and others have done to bring in amazing protections for whistleblowers, so that non-disclosure agreements aren't now this legal tool that people use to silence people, has been phenomenal. So like, more is coming, more reasons to feel hopeful. So something else that's also like one of, part of the fuel for this moment is this generation, as well as working with employers at the Consent Collective, we're working in universities. We have been for a long time, since around 2017. And if anybody was trying to raise a generation that had strong expectations around how they should be treated in the workplace, and really wanted this change, then they succeeded, because this next generation are entering workplaces with really clear understandings of how they expect to be treated, how they want to be treated, and all of those kinds of things. So as well as that, the legal change, we've got this like cultural society change as well. And in the university space, you might not be aware of this, but we are, because we're working there at the same time as the Worker Protection Act coming in the UK. The Office for Students have brought in some really strong regulation for universities, which means that every university now is having to do a lot of work with all of their students to make sure that they've had training so that they understand consent, that they're getting an education around the prevention of sexual harassment. So that is happening for the first time right now as people start their new academic year at universities across all of England and Wales. So that's all part of this momentum, all part of the stuff that is creating change at the moment. And if that wasn't enough, we've also got a government that's pledged to halve violence against women and girls in a decade. Which, as someone who's been working at this for 20 years, that would mean the pace of change is really going to pick up a lot. I admire the ambition. And actually, I think one of the things I notice about that is as I've been working and doing this throughout my career, one of the patterns I notice is as a a global society, we're not all moving at the same pace and in the same direction. Some of us, it's almost like it's a relay race. Like some countries lead for one moment, and then another country might be pioneering something new. I think it would be pretty safe to say that right now, the UK in particular is really coming out with this ambitious new legislative program and this kind of manifesto pledges. I promise you that the current US government did not pledge to halve violence against women and girls as part of their manifesto pledge. Like this is where a lot of the energy around this work is at the moment, specifically in the UK. So it feels like right now, if you're here and you're working in the UK, there are a lot of reasons to feel hopeful. There's an awful lot of momentum. And like this, all of this stuff that I've got around me at the moment, this is the success of those previous generations. This is them having achieved their job to bring in the laws, to bring around the cultural the desire for that change on a cultural basis. And then that task lands with us. Like our job as a generation is to take all of that and to turn it into meaningful change, because all of this doesn't mean anything if we don't actually create the change. So the real question for us to be asking is like, what are we going to be doing with all of these ingredients, this momentum, this legislation, this generation that want change, the fact that this is now much more part of people's education whilst they're going through certainly higher education. What are we going to be doing as employers to in our workplaces to take these ingredients and turn it into impact? And I think especially I'm certainly feeling it at the moment. I feel like if hope is this candle, the UK for this topic area is really holding it right now. And the more we can do with that, the more we can then pass on when, other nations are picking this up and being inspired by what we've done, but also, we're creating some momentum which hopefully can influence other spaces too. So if we start to take all of that and think about our workplaces, our situations, the places that we're responsible, we can start to maybe like question, like, are we feeling the hope? Are we seeing the changes? Are there reasons to be hopeful if we look at our own workplaces and our own working experiences? Like those of you who've been in the workplace for a while, I'm curious about whether you can personally see the change because you're attending training sessions that you wouldn't have attended before, because genuinely the culture might have felt like it's changed in ways that it hadn't in the past, or because there's actually maybe the work hasn't been done, but there's a genuine commitment on the part of your organization to get this done. I'm actually going to hand that question over to Annabelle or Kerry in terms of the hope. Like, are you feeling it? Are you feeling the hope at Gattaca, Matchtech?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And again, as you said, I think it's nice to give yourself permission to feel hopeful. I think, again, just looking at LinkedIn over the course of the day today, with it being an awareness day, there's not a lot of hope on LinkedIn. It's, every post is pretty damning, and you read that and you think to yourself, we're never going to get there. But if I think about it from again a workplace perspective, and I guess I'm an unusual person in the sense that I've been at Matchtech and Gattaca for 16 years. And what that gives me is a really great perspective of change. And in answer to your question, the answer is yes, I am feeling hopeful. And that's because I've seen the business that I work for evolve and change so much over that time. And actually, regardless of this, of having dedicated roles like myself, and we have our head of ESG as well, where we're focusing on all of those sort of bigger picture things around environmental, social, and governance, regardless of that being a sort of newer part of what we do. It's something that I've just seen and felt, just sort of over the last few years. And probably with younger people coming into our business, that newer generation where their expectations are much higher for being in a safe and respectful workplace, is fantastic because it sort of raises the bar for all of us. So, yeah, I think that I'm quite proud of us as a business. I think that we've got work to do, of course, as everybody does. But no, I'm feeling hopeful, and it's Matchtech and Gattaca now feels like a safer, more respectful, kinder, a place where we look out for each other a little bit more. So yes, bit of a long answer, but yes, I'm feeling hopeful. What about you, Kerry?
I am, and mine's in a different way because aside from all the really great stuff we're doing at Matchtech, in my role, I'm speaking to a lot of clients, and this is probably an area that I've only really been involved in advocating since earlier this year. So I've not had much involvement before. So I started having some conversations and was really pleasantly surprised that a lot of our clients are doing a lot of work in this space. We obviously had the roundtable we did a couple of months ago. There were some really great ideas shared there. And I thought, well, that's really good because people are really thinking about this, thinking how they can make an impact, which is brilliant.
Oh, that's awesome. That's. I mean, I'm not surprised to hear that from both of you because we get to see it too, and we see it with our other clients as well. Makes me curious though, Annabelle. Like, I haven't looked massively on LinkedIn today, but I do think there's this interesting thing where we think that awareness raising always means talking about how big the problem is. I'm looking forward to awareness days like this in the future where we can recognize that we still have work to do, but we can also start to celebrate the work that's being done, because if we depress ourselves too much, we're not going to be inspired to push that bit harder to make the changes. I think yeah, certainly as an activist, I'm more of a fan of inspiring people to be all they can be, because that normally takes us in the right direction. Like fundamentally, like we're like hardwired to be awesome as far as I'm concerned. So like, how can we help people become that and be that in their workplaces and in every other aspect of their lives? Rather than I think rather than doubling down on how big the problem remains to be, like, yeah, it's huge, and the work won't be done until no amount of sexual harassment is acceptable. So this is going to be a long-term piece of work. And in terms of other things, so if we noticing changes in our workplaces, I'm curious about what those kind of key changes, what they might feel like they are. We saw the slide at the beginning, Annabelle, about all of the stuff that you're doing. What do you think? What do you think those kind of next steps are? How are you going to keep the hope alive at Gattaca?
Yeah, I think actually having our employee resource group is really important because we've got that kind of terms of reference with that. We've got that cadence. It's sort of a structured group, and it's quite representative of everybody in our business as well. So we're really spending that quality time to sort of get together and listen to each other and find out what's happening within our business, almost kind of hearing from, what's going on in the weeds, if you like, forgive the phrase. But I think for us, and most importantly, and one of the reasons that we, again, want to continue our relationship with the Consent Collective, because it's all about consent, and consent is a skill that people need to learn, and it's so important that we. The bit where it becomes sustainable is the bit where you empower somebody else to have the conversation at that moment. And again, we don't always want everything to be escalated to me and Elliot and everyone else in the HR team. We'll sit there after a Christmas party and be like, oh, what's going to happen? And the hope is that we don't feel like that again, but we're feeling hopeful about that as well. To go back to your first question, so we want to be able to, yeah, it's all about empowering, creating that sustainability with empowerment, and making sure that people understand and can develop that skill, and everybody is capable of learning something and learning a skill, which is also very refreshing, and again gives us lots of hope.
No, that's awesome. And I think if you're looking for a practical, like, how do we take hope and turn it into something real in our workplace, I think the minute you start to see this as a skills piece of work, then that's the minute you're going to be making not just lasting impact in your workplace, but that also creates the ripple effect, because when somebody's got a new skill and they feel confident using it, then they're going to be deploying that skill in all sorts of different spaces. That's why I'm particularly excited about the work we're getting to do in workplaces because of that ripple effect. And at the end of the day, for most people want to be able to be that colleague and that manager. They want to know what to do to step in the moment, but they're often just afraid of doing the wrong thing and making it worse. So if we can take those amazing ingredients, which is this person wants to do this, they can recognize it's not right and they want to step in. If we can create learning experiences where they feel equipped to do so, and a workplace culture where that's like what happens here, like we can give and receive feedback, then yeah, then we can work towards situations where not every case is escalated. I feel like the old way of dealing with this was mostly not talking about it, but then if any conversations were happening, it was HR's job to have them. And I think that the future absolutely needs to be, of course, HR will always have a responsibility around this, but really we need managers and colleagues to be able to give that kind of in the moment feedback, so that people can get the message that you're at work, you're not out and about on a Saturday night, you're in a professional space, that isn't appropriate. And also, like, I'm assuming you'd want that feedback because I'm assuming perhaps you thought you were being funny, and actually that's you got your barometer wrong. That's not appropriate for here. Have we got any questions for anyone, or any reflections in the chat in terms of how hopeful you're feeling about things at your workplace, or if there's a barrier or an obstacle between you and feeling hopeful? What might it look like?
Hopefully everybody can use the chat function if they want to, or you can put something anonymously in the Q&A function as well if you wish.
There's nothing in the Q&A at the minute. I have been having a look, but I will start with a question if while we wait for some more to come through. Are there some easy ways to implement, or sort of some, practical things that we can be doing now to ensure that we're working towards preventing sexual harassment in the workplace?
Yeah, I think so we've mentioned there's having that skills focus and seeing this as a skills piece. Annabelle mentioned at the beginning that you have your employee reference group. I think having a home for this work at your workplace, like establishing that could even be a good starting place. If you're wondering where to start, then that might be something that you do to kind of gather the stakeholders, and the interested parties, and create that structure, and that let's meet again next quarter or however frequently it is. I think that's a great practical step. Obviously, like, a big part of this is the risk assessment side of it as well, like considering the particular risks at your organization. So that will be your industry, that will be who you employ, where they're going, interactions with the public, all of these different things. You need to kind of start considering that. So getting your head around that. And I would say also, like, this work fundamentally, it's about feeling safe with the work. I feel like historically most organizations have pushed the prevention of sexual harassment away because they've reacted to it in quite a fear-based way. Like, that sounds scary. Why would we do that? We don't want to have those kinds of conversations here. We don't want to look like we've got a problem, like push it away. The future is one where we can feel comfortable having vulnerable conversations that are necessary, like the prevention of workplace sexual harassment. And so you need to do what you can to feel comfortable, whilst really doing the work. That's why organizations like us exist, so that there's somebody you can pick up the phone and have a chat if you're like, I'm not sure what to do in this situation, or do you have some training, or whatever it might be. If you've been tasked with dealing with this for your organization, I think it is wise to appreciate that is quite complex terrain that you've been asked to hold. And definitely don't hold it alone. Make sure that you're equipped, because it's fine if you just scratch the surface. These are our policies, like just do something that hasn't got any depth with it. But with this topic area, it can get out of hand if you kind of want to open up conversations and people disclose. Like, you need to feel comfortable with the terrain, and that comfort is going to come from, I've had some training, I kind of know how to hold this space, and also I've got backup. I think that can be quite practical. I actually compare this terrain to, like, it's more mountaineering than a walk in the park. So you do need to think, are you equipped? Is there a mountain guide? Do you know these hills? Like, those kinds of things. And the good news is that you know, as with actual mountains, like the actual, if you are equipped and you've got the skills and you feel like the exhilaration of the climb, like getting to the summit, like there are lots of rewards in doing this work well. To be part of a culture where, you know, you were able to have that conversation, do that work, give people those skills. And also, like today will mean a lot. The elimination of violence against women and girls today will personally mean a lot to a lot of people who work for you. I don't think employers have historically thought very much about how many people come here to work every day who've got a personal history with this topic area.
Yeah.
But it will mean so much to those individuals if they see their employer really doing the work in a way that looks like it's careful and it's thought through. And so all of that is there for you to work with. I think one of the reasons why we could feel really hopeful is I think we've got the best tools possible at the moment. We've got really good legislation. You kind of have to do the work. The culture is there, like people want this. We know how to do it, is that skills-based kind of approach. And so really this is like a massive invitation to kind of participate in this moment where if the baby boomers started the conversation, like we get to be the ones that actually roll our sleeves up and practically create that change in our organizations and leave those organizations in a better shape than when we found them. And for those of us who are ambitious, leave our industries in a better shape than we found them, so that when the next generation enter the workplace, it's one where there's significantly less sexual harassment happening.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nina. We've got a comment here in the chat that says, I'm feeling very hopeful, but many people still aren't confident to call people out. I think there is a need for more regular training / awareness for it to be a culture shift. So any comments on the comment, Nina?
Yeah, I really hear you. I think I feel that right now in society we're very hyper vigilant. There's a lot of fear and there's a lot of conversations can quickly turn binary. It can feel quite fractious. And I do think that's why the approach needs to be grounded, like we can do this. I see that happening all over the place. So like my faith in people's ability to have these skills and use them, like that faith is there because I've seen it happen. We've heard from our clients, you know, what happens after the training. So we know it can be done. But I completely agree that the way not to do this work, and you know, that generation that's entering the workplace, they need this skills training too, because what the work isn't is policing our colleagues, calling everybody out, accusing people straight away. Like the work needs to be much more nuanced and skillful than at that. We need to be able to respond in proportion to what we've witnessed. We need to not automatically every time jump to that's harassment, that's not okay, you're cancelled. Like that can't be if that's the approach, this will not work. So that's why that kind of more skillful, more nuanced, more careful, and helping people reflect. It's like, how would you like to be approached if you'd made a mistake about the language you were using, the thing you said or did? Because we are all capable of doing that. It might not be around gender, but you might say the wrong thing around ethnicity or disability or do the wrong thing. So how can we be giving and receiving feedback in a way that is absolutely determined to prevent workplace sexual harassment, but also has compassion and is done in a way where the person on the receiving end is most likely to hear what they're being told and do something about it, which if all we're going to do is shame our colleagues, that is not going to create the change that we want at all. That's just going to create more division. And so, yeah, the work, when it's done well, has a feeling. It's grounded. It's not hypervigilant and afraid. And I think that's how we can tell if it's working in our workplaces. And that's why it's mountaineering and not just this easy thing. That can be done in a in a 4-minute video. There's a bit more to it than that. But can it be done? Yes, definitely. If you want some practical tools in terms of how to do it, I'm sure Cynthia is putting into the chat links to like our resources. Like this, we have training resources. We've got our Safe Workplace Culture membership, which actually that is a way of making it feel a bit grounded and safer to be able to frame these conversations internally along the lines of like, we're really proud to be members of this. It means we're really committed. Like it's got a really positive, solution-focused language to it. And it's also a way of connecting with other organizations that also are creating those kinds of changes in their workplaces. So that gives you that positive framing. But the other bits are there. I'm sure Sin is popping stuff in the chat as we speak. And I can actually pop some email addresses, some website addresses on my slide.
Thanks, Nina. I'll jump in with another question. We speak to a lot of HR leaders in our roles. I'm wondering what are the most common blind spots in the workplace for workplace harassment policies, so that HR leaders should address so they don't then fall off that mountain and land into trouble.
I think the most common one I've seen is having a policy that satisfies the lawyers. So it's compliant and it has all the ingredients you would want. But if one of your people was to read that policy, they don't maybe even understand what it means. So I think good policy is really easy to understand, and it feels like it's part of the organization rather than written by a lawyer. I think it's a mistake to assume that we have a shared understanding of what words like respect mean. I think you need to flesh it out. I think you need to help people genuinely understand what kinds of behaviors you expect and also what you don't expect, so that it's not left to their assumption. I think assumption is a huge part of the problem when it comes to this topic area. People assume everybody else is okay with what they're doing. They assume they're being funny when they're not being funny. Like, we need to kind of take assumption out of it. So yeah, with the policies, I'd make it as human as possible. And I really like values. I really like using your organizational values around this work. Like, this is who we say we are as an organization. And that definitely means it when it comes to workplace sexual harassment. I think it's really strong when that's what's emphasized. I think the policies are useful for kind of clarification. But I would encourage you to kind of really look at those values. And if you want a space to kind of give some thought to that and some time, we run roundtables where you can come and we can have a look at, what are your organization's values and how does that relate to this, and which of your values can we lean on if we want to talk about the prevention of workplace sexual harassment at your workplace.
Lovely. Thank you, Nina. I don't think we've got any other questions that have come through. So I'm just going to pop my final slide up for us here. As you know, if you've been to any of my events, we always ask for feedback. We love feedback. We like to know what else you would like to see from us. So do feel free to scan the QR code and fill in the form. It will take a couple of minutes. But I just wanted to say thank you so much to you, to Nina, and everyone at the Consent Collective. You bring so much knowledge. Everything is so clear and so beautifully articulated. And again, it's really nice to have a session where we're talking about hope and positivity. I think that, sometimes, as you say, that when we're tackling these really tough topics, you can go away feeling like you're despairing at humanity. And that sometimes I feel like that, and that changes on a daily basis. I think that's quite normal in the ED&I space, but it's really nice today to find some hope and to keep moving forwards positively, because that's where we all want to be. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Hello and welcome everybody to our webinar today. We've actually chosen to host this session on this day, 25th of November, quite deliberately, because this day marks a very key awareness day, which is the elimination of violence against women and girls. Now, the day exists because women and girls face a disproportionate amount of sexual harassment and violence compared to men. And sadly and unfortunately, this can and does take place within a working environment. So to introduce myself, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Annabelle Honor, Head of EDI for Matchtech, and my role here is to lead on all of our ED&I work, and I work as part of our people team, our HR team, and worker protection is very much on our agenda, and that's as we continue to navigate legislation and the case law that we've started to see coming through. So again, it's good to have some of these cases to help us to see, what good looks like and what we need to do next. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. The webinar is being recorded and can be shared with you afterwards. You can ask questions anonymously or contribute via our chat. So you should be able to access all of those on Zoom today. And finally, I want to acknowledge that today's topic, sexual harassment, is deeply sensitive and can be a personal issue, and it may evoke strong emotions or memories for some of us. So our intention today, as always, is to approach this conversation with care and respect for ourselves and for each other. If at any point you need to step away or take a moment, please feel free to do so. Okay, so worker protection at Matchtech, what does this look like? Well, as like all businesses and all people team or HR teams, we're doing lots of work in this space. We are committed to creating really safe and inclusive